2020, Zoom casually rolled out a new feature for businesses. It tracked employee eye movements during meetings and alerted their boss if they weren't paying attention. Scrolling or dozing off during this week's performance review? Zoom registered and reported your boredom. I learned about that story from Nita Farahany, a professor at Duke Law School. Professor Farahany is the foremost champion of the concept of cognitive liberty, the right to the space in your skull free from unwanted intrusion.
I think of cognitive liberty as the right to self-determination over your brain and mental experiences.
And Zoom's brain snitching is just the mildest form of modern cognitive surveillance.
Every camera you walk past that is integrated with AI systems increasingly can decode mental states.
Farahany worries that rapidly advancing AI processing power, combined with near-universal camera coverage, could bring a world where outsiders can easily extract information you thought was safe within your skull.
You can take a person's face, look at their brain activity, see the facial movements, and be able to decode a lot of what they're thinking and feeling.
I gave you my bio. I don't want you to think that I'm some libertarian radical.
Are you not libertarian?
Not really anymore. I think there's a couple bits of me.
But you were.
Yeah, but in the way that like every 22-year-old philosophy major who read Atlas Shrugged when he was 20 is libertarian.
I love Atlas Shrugged.
I like it too. I like it even for its literary merits. But
Yeah, I didn't like the long diatribes. Like there were times where I was just like, come on, give me a break. Like I don't want to read, like if it's a philosophy paper, just give me a philosophy paper.
No. In the mind of a 22-year-old newly minted philosophy graduate interning at the Cato Institute, if I think I'm John Galt, I'll read up to 150 pages of a monologue telling me about
you thought
my
you were
own
John,
greatness.
You thought you were John Galt.
Well, the only reason people like that work is because they think they're one of the 1%. You wouldn't read it if you think you're one of the takers.
I thought I was Dagny. I didn't think I was.
No, Dagny's also one of the 1%.
Right, but she's not John Galt.
I meant like, you assume you're the Randian superhero. You wouldn't read it if you thought that you were one of the takers, right?
You might be. You might be reading it because you might think like, no, what I actually care about is redistribution of wealth.
I don't think Atlas Shrugged turned anybody into.
No, but it might have. It might have reinforced their beliefs. I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't a philosophy major as an undergrad. I got a PhD in philosophy, but I was not a philosophy major as an undergrad. I didn't even take a philosophy class as an undergrad.
At all?
At all.
What'd you major in?
Genetics. I feel like I'm a confusing enigma to you already.
No, it's great, actually. We could just talk about this. I don't know if anybody's going to care. But
they won't at all.
This is probably more interested than talking about, I don't know, the Minds Act. Although I do want to talk to you about the Minds Act.
It's just mind, not minds, but.
Okay. Are you going to correct me over the course of my podcast?
Probably, yeah. Isn't it more fun that way for people?
No, I mean, they need to see me as they're supposed to have a parasocial relationship with me.
They're
and
not.
I'm the hero.
They're not. And they want if they have a parasocial relationship with you and they see your guest not being nice to you, they're going to feel even better for you because they're going to be like, oh, I've got to like rise to protect him.
But they need to know that this is the way you were the second I picked you up in the lobby.
There you go. Yeah.
It's not a performance at all.
Yeah, it's just me. It's just me.
It was kind of like skeptical apathy from the beginning. It was like, who the
I don't know who you are, and I need some coffee and chocolate.
Who's this motherfucker? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we can start with that, though.
Okay. Coffee and chocolate?
No.
Okay.
The Mind Act.
Oh, okay, great.
This is actually where some of my still simmering libertarian instincts did kick in. I didn't know what it was until I was researching for this interview, right? Yeah. Before I attempt to construct an argument against it, how about you explain what it is?
It's hard for me to imagine from a libertarian perspective what argument you would construct against it, because what it is it directs the FTC to look into and study the issue of mental privacy and whether there is anything for the government to do about it or not. And so from that perspective, it shouldn't run afoul of anybody's libertarian instincts. And what it does is say that there are increasing risks in the digital age from both neurotechnologies being able to decode and potentially change the human brain, the intersection of neurotechnologies with other AI technologies, and other related data from biometrics and other ways of being able to make inferences about brain and mental states, and that may pose unique risk to consumers with respect to their mental privacy and mental self-determination. And the FTC ought to study the issue to see whether it makes sense or if it's necessary to put into place anything that would either put special protections around neurological and other related data, or to see if there's risk of specific misuse in particular context, like education or workplace or other settings in which mental privacy would be necessary for people to be able to exercise their mental self-determination. So from that perspective, I'm not sure what you would construct as an argument against, other than you don't like the FTC in general.
I'm not litigating yet. I'm trying to get good vibes right now. We'll get into that eventually. I'll get you there. I got 45 minutes before I launch any critiques. So that's the legislation. Mm-hmm. Just to do a little bit more ground setting, how do you personally define this concept of cognitive liberty?
Yeah. I think of cognitive liberty as the right to self-determination over your brain and mental experiences. So just kind of full stop. What that translates into from a liberty perspective is not really negative or positive liberty. It doesn't track perfectly to like John Stuart Mill or anything, even though that's where it was born from, was from On Liberty. Instead, what it is thinking about, in order to exercise any form of liberty, you need the capacity to form your mind. And the constitutive parts of your mind are made up of self-determination, and cognitive liberty is about protecting that, the constitutive parts of thinking.
Okay. So you have the right to your own mind, which means you can put things into your mind that change it.
Yes.
Voluntarily,
yes.
Of course. Again, no attempt to critique quite yet. What is your argument, and potentially with some specific examples, as to why some new technology products are impinging upon individual consumers' cognitive liberty, perhaps in ways that they don't appreciate?
So first, it's important to recognize that I think of cognitive liberty as both a right to and a right from. So it's a right to access and change your brain if you choose to do so, and it's a right from interference with your brain and mental experiences. And as a right to and a right from, this isn't inherently anti-tech in any way, shape, or form. If somebody wants to use any of the technologies we're about to talk about, by all means, they should be able to do so. If they want to enhance their brain, like, go for it. If they want to diminish their brain within limits of, what their harm is to others, then they should be able to diminish their brains. People do that all the time, like drink alcohol. And we know that that has cognitive impairment effects. And if people want to do that and they don't...
Or eat Reese's chocolate, as you did right before we got into the podcast booth.
That, I really just don't feel like that harms my brain. What I was trying to do was be sharp for you.
It was a modification of your mental state, though.
It was. And I downed it with some caffeine, and that was an enhancement of my cognitive state. Or we'll let your listeners decide if that was an enhancement. They don't know what I was like beforehand, so they don't know if it was an enhancement or a diminishment. But the example that I use in my book, The Battle for Your Brain, is the coming age of widespread neurotechnology. So we should unpack that a little bit first, and then it'll be clearer with examples about both what the positive benefits are for being able to access and change your brain, but also what the profound potential risks are of an era of brain transparency. So neurotechnology that I'm talking about is not the implant in your brain, even though that's also neurotechnology. It's about the rest of us. And so many people today wear sensors in their rings or in their smartwatches that pick up different biometric features of their body, and then AI is used to decode what that means. And increasingly, there are products on the market that embed sensors that pick up neural activity. So September 30th, Meta just in stores like Best Buy, if you have an appointment because it takes weeks to get one, you can pick up their new neural band. And so they have these augmented reality glasses together with a wristlet, which they've already said is likely to turn into a watch. And that wristlet picks up brain activity as it goes from your brain down your arm to your wrist, which means it's picking up peripheral nervous system activity, not stuff, centrally in your brain, but neurons that travel from your brain and signal to your hands to swipe or type or move, or like right now I'm moving my hands around. All of that is, can be picked up by the neural band. Or just this past week, Cognition, which is one of the augmented and virtual reality headsets, announced a new collaboration with Apple where the back of the Apple Pro Vision, the back strap, is being replaced by the back strap that Cognition has that's embedded with EEG sensors, electroencephalography sensors. And those sensors pick up central nervous system activity, which is, as you think, as you do anything, neurons are firing in your brain. Hundreds of thousands of neurons are firing at the same time, and they give off tiny electrical discharges that can be picked up at the surface level of your scalp through EEG. And the integration of the EEG backstrap together with the the VR allows lots of sensors to work together to be able to make inferences about where you want to navigate on the screen. What these two advances are picking up brain activity for purposes of neural interface, replacing your keyboard and your mouse as a way that you can navigate through augmented reality and virtual reality devices, so that instead of like having something on your face and then a mouse or a keyboard, you think about interacting with these devices instead. And that's cool in some ways, right? Which is, you don't want to have to like have these devices and then have something cumbersome in between you. But it means that we're increasingly training AI systems to decode brain activity. And then the more powerful those models become, because all of these devices learn you as you use them, become increasingly more precise and powerful to be able to decode your brain activity. Suddenly, the kind of one space that people thought they had for freedom, which was mental privacy, is collapsing. And from my perspective, that kind of space of pause, that space of reflection, the one space where you can be truly authentic and, form your capacity to have thoughts and to have unique thoughts and to have dissident thoughts, all of that happens in your mind. And the ability to decode it means we need to start thinking about whether we need special rights around cognitive liberty that safeguard us in the workplace and education, vis-a-vis government surveillance and intervention, or just, kind of ordinary life. Like, do you need to know that you have security in your mental privacy in order to be a fully functioning human?
Right. Can you also you have some pretty stunning examples of very popular apps that people use that track them in ways that potentially they don't appreciate?
Which ones are you thinking about? I mean, just things like on your computer, like Zoom?
WhatsApp and Zoom.
Yeah. So do you mean with facial emotional recognition?
Yeah, just explain what that is.
Okay. So there was a paper that came out recently that really made me think about when did we cross the threshold of losing mental privacy? Because while my last book, The Battle for Your Brain, really focuses on the decoding of mental states from neurotechnology, increasingly AI is getting better and better at being able to decode all kinds of biometric signals, including the fact that there's so many different cameras that are trained on people's faces, that what can be done from inferences about just micro changes that you make on your face to decode mental states, and how that really aligns almost perfectly with brain states. Like, you can take a person's face, look at their brain activity, see the facial movements, and be able to decode a lot of what they're thinking and feeling. And so some of the examples that I give about how that can already be made possible, for example, is TikTok has all of these different facial scanning features that people have opted into that enable real-time scanning of what's happening with their face to be able to infer their mental states. Or WhatsApp cameras can actually be used to decode what a person is thinking. Filters that people use on places like Instagram enable decoding of not just like facial recognition, but facial emotional signals. And there have been some already class action lawsuits that have been brought against, for example, Facebook, where when a person is locked out of their account, increasingly they have to submit a video to show their liveness of their face. It's not just like a copy of their ID that they can submit. They have to literally submit a live video of them speaking or talking. And there's no telling what's happening with that data, right? Is that data being used to train models? Is that data being used to make mental inferences about the people? There's no clear information about what's being done with any of that data, which means every camera you walk past that is integrated with AI systems increasingly can decode mental states. And it raises this question of, where is the boundary between mental privacy and our everyday lives, and which technologies actually do cross that threshold? And if we are going to put into place any kind of safeguards, how broadly or how narrowly are we going to go so that we still enjoy innovation and the benefits of technology, but create a space, if one still exists, for mental privacy?
Right. So you're saying that the Meta has powerful AI systems in operation already, or could, that are trained on the human face, where they can see like a little twitch here, a little movement of the mouth here, and know that corresponds to a specific internal emotion.
They could,
potentially,
right? I don't know that they do.
Right. But you're saying also, though, that there are consumer products that are on the market now that are, we don't know if they're doing a version of that, but can track people's faces and potentially be making guesses about what's happening on the inside.
Yes. We already know that facial emotional recognition systems have been deployed in workplaces, in government settings. And the fact is that consumer apps can already do that. Do they do that? Do their privacy policies protect against it? Are they live using any of the images? None of that is stuff that we have access to or know right now. But for example, during the pandemic, Zoom had created this very quickly, incredibly unpopular feature where you could use a person's video and see whether or not they were actually paying attention or if their mind was wandering while they were on a video call. Yeah. You could see if they were switching between screens and if they were distracted. And they rolled this out for employers, and there was just a massive uproar as soon as they did, right? Of course, like, how many of us multitask while on Zoom calls? Almost all of us, right? And how many of us want our employers being able to use our cameras when they're on to be able to track whether we're distracted or paying attention, whether we're tired, whatever our emotional states are? Virtually no one, right? That feels incredibly intrusive and invasive. And that's what I'm getting at with this concept of cognitive liberty, which is before now, we were limited in our capacity of mind reading by looking at each other, by making inferences about what other people are thinking. And that's something we all do as humans, right? One of the first capacities that come on board when you're a child is theory of mind. And once you learn theory of mind of another and learn that another person has a different mind than you do, you then gain the capacity to try to persuade them and manipulate them. In my book, I talk about my then 3-year-old who is like a master manipulator, who walks up to me when she's 3, has figured out how to manipulate, and says, Mommy, would I like a popsicle? And I correct her and I say, I don't know, Electra. Would you like a popsicle? And she says, oh, yes, Mommy, thank you. And I'm like, okay, I was totally just hoodwinked into that while I think that I'm, training her in English and she's training me in the art of master manipulation. But we all do that. But we were limited by our human capabilities of what we could actually infer from, even the best person at mind reading another person isn't truly able to decode what another person is thinking. And people work on perfecting this art in poker games of being able to maintain a perfect poker face. And, do you learn the tells of the other players? Technology is totally changing that, and is changing it in an asymmetrical way, because it's not likely that you and I sitting in a podcast studio are going to suddenly have technology where I can read what you're doing, unless I make you wear one of these headsets I'll tell you about in a minute. But, if you're an employee in a setting where an employer has asymmetric access to your brain activity data, even the staunchest libertarian will have a hard time defending that you have true freedom of contract in a setting like that, where they can literally see what you're thinking in response to a raise that they offer to you, or what your kind of negotiating position is in any setting.
Just for what you're saying, given the current trajectory of the technology.
Yes.
Specifically that.
Yes.
The idea that your employer could be able to guess with high levels of accuracy specific thoughts and emotions that are going through your brain.
Yes.
Is not some distant dystopian scientific fantasy, but could become a hard reality in the relatively short future.
It already is a hard reality. So right now, employers already across the globe have required people to wear headsets that track their brain activity, and they're not at the point yet where they can decode like your full thoughts. What they can decode is your reaction, your brain state reaction. Is it positive? Is it negative? Are you happy or sad? Are you tired? Is your mind wandering?
They can tell these things?
Yes, today. Yeah, already with the pretty, in many ways, rudimentary technology that's already on the market. And AI is making that more and more powerful every day, where the signal that can be extracted is becoming increasingly more powerful. And more importantly, the capacity to take that signal and meaningfully decode it with AI models is becoming increasingly more powerful. So yes, they can already do it. As these technologies become more widespread, where people, instead of having AirPods, have AirPods with EEG sensors in them that are issued by their workplace, or, instead of just having an inventory band that they wear on their wrist, or having an inventory band that is embedded with EMG sensors, electromyography sensors, more and more of that can be decoded by the employer or their educational institution if they're required to wear it in their classroom, which brings me to the headset that I could put on you right now to figure it out in this room. For a long time, there have been a lot of kind of entertainment neurotechnologies, and I say entertainment because they're incredibly limited in their functionality. They're not neural interface where instead of using a mouse and a keyboard, you use neural interface. They're use-specific technologies, like you put on an EEG headband, and the only thing you can do with it, because of the app that's powering it, is to see if you're in a meditative state. But there's a fun headset that I've long teased my students or audiences that I'm speaking at that I'm going to make them wear, which is this little headband that has cat ears at the top. And when you're paying attention, the cat ears are upright. And when you're starting to lose focus or your mind wanders, the cat ears come down. I feel like that would be awesome. Like I'd be like, hey, listen, why don't you put those on during this conversation?
Yeah.
And if you're starting to get bored with something I'm saying, I'm just going to have your tell, right? Or you're in class and you're not paying attention to me and it'll start to go down. That's the point in the talks usually when I'm like at a point where I'm talking about all the upside and all of the enhancements. And I get to this example of like, or we could do something really fun. And you kind of hear the air being sucked out of the room.
They see it, yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, wait, I don't want you to be able to see that I've lost focus and I'm not paying attention. And that's when I say, right. So let's talk about the risks of brain transparency, because they're profound, right? We think we have this space where we can zone out or fantasize or be like, oh, wait, did I turn off the stove this morning, right? And you want to be able to do that.
Right. So to back up a little bit, again, a lot of the examples you've given so far, though, do seem like opt-in surveillance.
In what way?
You're talking about this. I say this as someone who probably shares an instinctual revulsion in like the excessive technologification of human life, right? I think like Apple Watches have like an oddly dystopian aura to them. So I think I'm on board, right? But you're talking about this new Meta product that apparently there is some number of my fellow countrymen that are going to get on a wait list and go to a Best Buy to purchase and put on their bodies, right? But they're deciding to use it. You talk about WhatsApp. People are, even if there's full transparency about what it's tracking.
Let me pause you and just say, like, your phone is sitting there. It probably has your notes on it for this conversation, right?
Yeah, Google Docs. What does Google Docs know about me?
Oh, I'm sure everything. But no, here's my question for you. Why is it not on paper? Like, why do you have a phone?
I normally do these interviews on paper. I just forgot to pack it. Did you want the honest answer?
Yeah, honest is great. But why do you have a phone? Like, why do you have a mobile device?
Talk to my children, track my fantasy football scores.
That's it?
Equally essential.
But those two things, tracking your children and...
There's a couple more. I'm not going to tell you everything on my phone. You can't see my notifications.
Right, but do you feel like you have to have one?
I don't, actually.
You don't? That's great. So you could just like navigate the world without one?
I don't actually have to have one.
But you do?
But I do because of internal moral weakness. I have a smartphone.
Do you know a lot of people who don't have a smartphone?
I can only think of one person I know.
And why don't they have one?
A conscious decision because he's worried about Silicon Valley and tech oligarchs manipulating his internal emotional state with a smartphone.
It sounds like somebody I should meet.
Yeah, we've actually interviewed him for the channel. This guy by the name of Sebastian Younger. He's like a WoW war correspondent. But he has a very...
Does he have a phone?
He has a Verizon. He has a very fat Verizon flip phone, but he's an unusual character. His most recent book was him walking with some buddies up and down the East Coast following the train tracks. Because of how much he wanted to opt out of the spiritually degrading pieces of modernity. So he's not a normal person.
Okay, let's assume it's a person not opting out of society, right? And feel like they can't, right? They need the finances to be able to operate in society. They have a family. They have to provide for them. And what would you say are the minimum technological requirements for those people, right? It's probably a mobile device, probably a computer on top of it. And they need some peripheral device to be able to interact with that computer, right? Maybe it's built in if it's a laptop and they have a mouse and a keyboard. Yeah. But they need something. And at some point, we didn't have laptops. At some point, we didn't have mobile devices. But that point long since passed, and that's what we became locked into, right? To be able to participate in society, you needed those things. And we're not there yet with neurotechnology. We haven't reached the inflection point where in order to participate in society, you have to have neurotechnology embedded in your devices. And
do you think we could?
I think if the keyboard and the mouse become antiquated and your interface becomes neural interface because it's so much faster, it's so much more intuitive, it's so much more efficient, or if spatial computing really takes off, right, which is still remains to be seen if people want to wear computers on their faces or on their eyes. But if it does, you're not going to be walking around with a keyboard and a mouse in order to interact with your spatial computing devices. You're going to be using neural interface to do so. Or if the next generation of Apple AirPods that comes out, you have two options. You have the option that is with EEG sensors and the option without EEG sensors. And then 2 generations from now, the only option you have is the one with embedded sensors. Like the original watch that came out didn't have ECG sensors. Now you can't buy an Apple Watch without heart rate sensors built into it and other kinds of sensors. So, you know, we're not past the inflection point where you can't opt out. But we will get to that point if we allow us to get to that point. And in general, people don't stand up and protest. What they do is book out weeks in advance for appointments at Best Buy and line up for new technology and the coolest new gadget. And then it gets normalized. And this is a new threshold of technology. We do not have widespread neurotechnology in all of our devices today. But with the fact that Meta has just released a commercial product and that Apple has just made native input into Apple devices BCI HID, which means brain computer interface, neural signals can directly interface with Apple products. That's part of their accessibility features that they introduced last May. We're at the kind of midway point, I'd say. We're not even at the earliest point. We're at the midway point where major tech companies have now created platforms by which neural signals will operate their devices. And so, you're right. Today, people can opt in. I'm not convinced that 5 years from now they'll have that choice.
Right.
But maybe your friend, what was his name?
His name is Sebastian Younger.
Yeah, maybe Sebastian will still opt out. I bet he will, because he won't upgrade to, and I mean, upgrade's the wrong word, right? He won't decide to opt into widespread neural surveillance. But I think that most people, without even thinking about it, will do so. And I give a lot of examples of that in my book. Like, the way a lot of times new technologies get normalized is in entertainment and in other settings where it's decontextualized. So neurotech companies have partnered with L'Oreal and with perfumiers, where you can walk up to a perfume counter, put on a neurotechnology headset, smell different perfumes,
wow,
and see which one your brain loves the most. Or you can go into MoMA, look at some of the new generative AI art installations, put on an EEG headset, and become part of the art where your brainwave activity helps change the art that you see up there.
wow.
And people are like, that is so cool. Here is my brain activity. Or even more mainstream, IKEA in Brussels ran this experiment where they had these designer rugs. They were entering into partnership with artists, and they were selling limited edition rugs. And they kept finding that the limited edition rugs that they were selling, people would go buy, put up on eBay, and sell it for many times what they bought it for at IKEA. And IKEA wanted it to just go to people who really loved it. So they created this campaign in one of their stores where you had to go in, put on a neurotechnology headset, and look at the rug. And if you didn't truly love it, according to whatever metric they were measuring from your brain activity, you couldn't go home with it. And people just lined up for it, like, oh yeah, count me in. So we don't even recognize when we're giving up our rights, when it's decontextualized in that way. We don't realize what we're ceding. And then it becomes normalized because your positive association with the experience of like, oh, wasn't that fun? Wasn't that novel? Creates this reward, kind of perception in your brain where you start to develop positive rather than negative and creepy associations with it.
But I do wonder, let's say people were made fully transparent as to what these technologies did, right? Let's assume that you're right. There is such a thing as rights, and there's such a thing as rights of cognitive liberty, right? And even under those circumstances, people still flock to these technologies, and they still wanted it anyway.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't block them, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I believe in choice.
Right.
And if people fully understand what they are giving up, not just for themselves, but for everyone, and they would rather live in a world of widespread brain transparency where there's no space for mental reprieve.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to stand in the way of people doing that. But I do want them to have the choice, because right now you can't opt into products without giving away all of your personal data, right? The first generation of digital technologies were built on an advertising system that commodifies data. That doesn't have to be the model that we stick with forever. Like, we don't have to say it's pay with your personal data to play. And we could decide that this category is different, that you shouldn't have to pay with your brain activity in order to be able to access and use technology, especially if it becomes like basic infrastructure, where the only way for you to use a computer or opt into the digital world is by doing so through neural interface.
Wow. And you think that's something that could potentially happen relatively soon?
Yes. I'm the dystopian optimist.
Right. Okay. This is still hazy, I think. And maybe my brain is hazy because instead of having the Reese's Pieces, I just judged you for rocking the Reese's Pieces at 10:30 a.m.
You did.
And if I just taken it, this would have come out so clean and so eloquent, and you would have been stunned by its insight. So
yeah,
you're going to get the diluted.
I feel like it's important for people to have a right to enhancement and to not judge each other for it.
No judgment, right to enhancement.
Okay.
Yes. it seems like the vast majority of people, at least in American society, even today, are actively being given the choice as to whether or not they want to allow technology to invasively manipulate their internal cognitive world. And the vast majority of people are willingly and lovingly embracing it.
I don't think so. I don't believe that.
But I mean it like literally in terms of like on the average American's day.
No, but you're right that the average American is participating in what seems
I'm saying
like...
now.
I know.
Now. Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
And I think the average person does not actually understand the fragmentation that's happening. They sense it, right? People sense that their attention is fragmented. They sense the pull they have to their mobile devices. They sense, maybe even if they really studied themselves, they might even sense that they're addicted to their technology. But they don't understand it at a more profound level, meaning they don't realize that what's happened in a very short period of time is basically brain injury, that people have maladapted to a world that we weren't evolved for, and that evolution takes a lot longer. And so they get it sort of at the margins, but they don't understand it profoundly and deeply, nor do they have the capacity to resist or to find some way to name it or to fix it. And I think that's like cognitive liberties. If we're talking about rights, it's almost at the margins, right? Because if we're talking about neurotechnology, we've already opted into a world of such cognitive damage that, like, how do we fix it, right? And that's where I'm actually focusing my current work. That's what my second book is on, is the other side of cognitive liberty, right? So if the side of cognitive liberty that I really examined in The Battle for Your Brain was how do you put in place the rights against, a kind of dystopian future, that presumes you have the capacity for self-determination to begin with. And that's so eroded because of our maladaptation to the digital era that we really have to unpack what that means. Like, what are the core capacities of mental self-determination, and how do we rebuild those? And how do we enable and empower people to be able to understand the cognitive fragmentation that they're suffering from and make it powerful and easily reattainable so that we can evolve with technology in ways that empower us and don't fragment us.
Enslave us, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm ultimately sympathetic to the idea that we have this dopamine rewards system that was evolved in like the African savanna, and that the last 20 years in particular, you've had tens of thousands of genius level engineers in Silicon Valley trying to figure out
I don't think it's just that, though. Like, I don't think it's just the dopamine reward system. I think there are a bunch of unintended consequences that they didn't even hack for that we're suffering from. And I'll just give you one category of example that people don't really talk about, which is your interoceptive capability. So this is your ability to feel your body. And
I love this. I did some yoga last night. I'm so happy we're going to end on this. Go ahead.
Good. Because, right, I mean, yoga is one of the ways that you can reconnect with your body.
Oh,
and
my God. I can't believe you're mentioning this. Yeah,
there's story after story of, kids locked in gaming environments who literally urinate on themselves because they can't sense their own bodily signals. And there's actually really powerful neuroscience that shows what's happening is your body mentally attends to your digital representation of yourself. It's basically like, imagine your mind leaving your body and focusing on the needs of your digital avatar instead of your physical body. Yeah. And so it's prioritizing the needs of what's happening on the screen instead of what's happening in your body. And the result is like the most basic things like gut instinct just aren't developing. And the like severing of interoception, that wasn't something that they designed for.
No.
They didn't even know it was happening. But that's what I'm talking about, which is this next book, which gets into some of these issues that people, like, everybody's focusing on the dopamine reward system. Yes, that's a problem. But it turns out it's a bigger, more global, like reduction of self-determination than people realize across the board. And so to fix it, it's not just taking away like buttons or, not having the gamification of everything that leads to dopamine reward systems. It's starting with the most basic thing possible, which is centering us back in our physical bodies to be able to have any autonomy at all.
Right. We all just need to go Amish. What is it that we need to do?
No, I actually think that there is a way to do this with technology. I don't think that you can imagine a world like, the kind of reactionary approach right now, which is to ban devices. I get it. I just don't think it's realistic.
Right.
I think what we have to have instead
Well, you're fine banning devices for like middle school.
Sure, but even then you're not teaching kids. You're delaying it. And maybe that enables them to build some of these core capacities and gives them some time to do so. But the truth is they just go home and use the devices. So it's not teaching them, here's how devices actually undermine your self-determination, and here's the practices we can put into place to actually address it so that you can use technology and take purposeful pauses that allow you to reconnect with your body and to recognize your physical body, not just your digital avatar, right? Giving people awareness and tools to be able to adapt with technology rather than simply remove the technology and hope that that fixes it. That's, I think, where we have to focus our efforts.
Or it's not just teaching them explicitly, but also showing them analog meat-based things that are actually quite enjoyable.
Like yoga.
Like, well, yeah. Well,
yeah.